Next thing we're going to look at is some changes on the court in terms of the things they're focusing on. We kind of looked at that in the last video, but we're going to kind of focus a little bit more. Chief Justice Earl Warren is one that we're going to spend some time on in class, 1953. When he was Chief Justice, this was really considered one of the most active periods of time. And if you look at that time period, 1953's, it's going to include the 1960s and things like that. We're going to see a lot of civil rights issues being decided by the courts. And so this idea of protecting civil rights and civil liberties of the citizens from the government. So before 1937, the courts were ruling on protections that most conservatives like. You know, we're staying out of the businesses. We're letting the businesses run themselves. We're not worried about child labor laws. We're not going to be concerned with antitrust laws. These are all things that conservatives really favor. The firm is a person, and we cannot deny them their due process rights. After 1937, we see a switch in terms of the protections that the court is really looking after, and they really start to protect the liberals. This is when we're going to see, like I said, a lot of equal protection. We're going to use the 14th Amendment a lot in terms of not denying different groups of people rights that other people are guaranteed. Then we've talked about this in federalism, so none of this is new. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's still very important that you know this revival of state sovereignty. The term that we used back in federalism was devolution. And so what we're seeing is a swing back from courts ruling in favor of the national government and them being able to do anything they want to based on that. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, Commerce Clause. We're going to swing back and say, you know, not so fast. Not everything that happens can be related and tied to commerce. And so U.S. versus Lopez, Prince versus U.S., National Federation of Independent Business versus Sebelius. So you can stop the video and read those, but once again, this is all review. So these are things that you should already know. This was an interesting graph, the economics and civil liberty laws overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court by decade. And so what you're seeing here is during the span of time back in the 1900s through the late 1930s, we're going to overturn a great number of economic regulations that the government is imposing. After the 1940s, we're going to step back away and allow the federal government and Congress to give a lot of discretionary authority to these regulatory agencies, and so we're not going to rule so much or overturn so many of these rules. But now we see a focus from the 1950s through the 1970s, early 1980s, overturning civil liberty cases.